A lot of people don't realize this, but the world used to be filled with extremely large trees that were much bigger than most of what we have today. And it's not that trees lost this ability. If the forests we have today were allowed to grow undisturbed for thousands of years or so, we would see these giant trees return. A lot of types of trees, given the right circumstances, will grow to huge proportions, but the conditions have to be perfect. Take the redwood, for example. Their range used to extend down into Mexico and as far north as British Columbia and Alaska. But if you plant it anywhere but its specific native conditions, it will grow, but it won't reach nearly as big as they do in California. These redwood and giant sequoia might be the very last of the giant trees, other than a few other pockets of slightly smaller trees dotted across the world. But what happened to all the rest? Why are there almost no more giant forests, when there used to be so many? Europeans first arrived in North America when it was filled with these giant trees, and there's a lot of other areas that used to have giants of their own. Europe, the British Isles, Lebanon, North Africa, and many other places still house some remaining giants outside of the California redwoods. Tasmania has eucalyptus trees over 300 feet tall, as do some parts of mainland Australia. There's a 275-foot tall spruce in the Himalayan region of India. Brazil has a native tree called Angelime vermelho, the tallest of which is 290 feet. Borneo, Malaysia, has the tallest tropical tree, reaching up to 330 feet. The tallest Norway spruce is in Slovenia, reaching 220 feet. The Sitka spruce is the tallest in Canada, reaching 322 feet. And there's also the giant cypress in Taiwan, reaching 266 feet. By comparison, though, the tallest redwood is 380 feet tall, estimated between 700 and 800 years old. But scientists say given enough time, these trees could, in theory, reach up to 425 feet, given current conditions on Earth. And other species have this potential to grow that big as well, such as certain cypress species, as well as spruce, Douglas fir, mountain ash, eucalyptus, and others could get pretty close. But conditions need to be perfect, and these trees I mentioned that still exist are only small remnants of what used to be. All these areas and more were covered with giants, and to figure out why they were destroyed, we need to look to the oldest known story in human history. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was found underground in ancient libraries of clay tablets written in cuneiform, we're told Gilgamesh defeated the guardian of the great cedar forest, believed to have been in Lebanon, Humbaba, sent to the forest to guard its massive trees by the god Enlil. A forest that is almost completely gone today, with the tallest trees only reaching about 150 feet. However, in ancient times, the climate in the region was much more favorable, making the forest massive and the trees colossal. They're described in the Epic of Gilgamesh as tall enough to house a giant, with deep shade and awe-inspiring grandeur. And Gilgamesh and Enkidu went through the forest and picked out the largest and most significant trees to cut down, likely using them for building material in their kingdom of Uruk. But why? The story doesn't give a reason, but it's implied this act is a sort of show of power to the gods. A challenge saying that man can overcome the gods, or at least a man such as Gilgamesh may rise up and be equal with the gods. A challenge similar to the later story of Nimrod in the Tower of Babel. This was a common theme across many mythologies. These forests were seen as bridges in many cases, between the realm of the gods and the realm of man. That's why the god Enlil wanted so badly to guard it, he sent the most feared giant. These forests in many cases were places the gods could interact with man. Many of the gods across multiple cultures were said to live in forests, as did many other creatures, some of them not so benevolent. In many cultures, demons lived in the forests. Japan, for example, the Tengu live in the forests and prey upon man. But when you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. On the surface, forests are dark and mysterious, and anything can be lurking around the corner, especially with giant-sized tree trunks everywhere. Bandits, predators, animals, and even possible cryptids could have existed in these ancient forests. But also, these were places you would find sacred psychoactive herbs and mushrooms. They still do this in the Amazon. The ayahuasca vine and the accompanying DMT-containing plant are cultivated deep in the Amazon jungle. The vine growing up and down these giant trees, and the plant growing in its shade. Not only that, but anybody who hunts mushrooms knows the best place to do so is in the forest. Mushrooms thrive on shade, moisture, and dying plant material falling from the canopy. Not only that, but the rarest, most potent, and most unique forms of mushrooms grow only in old-growth forests. And these rare old-growth mushrooms have the potential to cure things like cancer and other diseases, as well as contain psychoactive compounds. In one case, in Northern Europe, shamans consumed mushrooms, known as Amanita muscaria, the one that looks like the Super Mario mushroom or Santa Claus. And they've done so for thousands of years. And the old stories tell of crazy, mind-bending spiritual journeys that the shamans would embark on using these mushrooms. However, people today report that the experience from these mushrooms is actually very mild, and no more psychoactive than a few drinks of alcohol. And many have theorized as to why this is. One idea is that the old shamans knew how to pick these mushrooms in the exact spot, in the exact conditions, and the season to maximize their potency. This may be true, but I think it goes further. You see, unlike most mushrooms, Amanita muscaria live in perfect symbiosis with its host. It does not need to feed off rotting trees like some mushrooms, but it lives with the trees, assisting its growth and defense systems through mycorrhizal fungi. These are the communication systems plants use with each other. They can even transport nutrients to each other in the forest through these mushroom root systems, called mycorrhizal fungi. So I think it's possible when these forests were much older and much larger and much healthier, these Amanita muscaria mushrooms grew alongside these giant trees and were much, much more potent, possibly even growing to much larger sizes themselves. So is this picture as to why these trees have been destroyed becoming clear? Gilgamesh wanted not only to show the gods his power, but he wanted to sever the bridge between the spirit world and ours. At least that's what these ancient stories tend to say. In many cultures, we have something called the cosmic tree or world tree. We find this in the Hindu and Jain mythology with the cosmic banyan tree, Yggdrasil in the Scandinavian, the ceiba tree in Mayan mythology, the newt tree in Egyptian, the cosmic mango tree in Philippine mythology, and there's others I missed as well. This tree was seen as so large it reached down into the depths of Earth, and its branches could be seen in the sky connecting the heavens to the Earth. But often it was also seen as having a physical representation, being an actual real tree as well. Yggdrasil, for example, with its Germanic equivalent, Irminsul, was said to be the largest tree in Europe, and it was where Odin, or Wotan in the German, hung himself to visit the spiritual realm and gain insight. Later, Charlemagne was said to have destroyed the sacred tree during the Saxon Wars, as a show of power of Christianity over paganism. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, we find stories of the Jambu tree. It's said to be located south of the sacred Mount Meru, the central axis of Earth according to Buddhist cosmology. This area where the tree grows is considered very sacred, a place where its inhabitants have reached enlightenment. The tree is described as so large its shade can cover entire regions, and its fruits are as large as elephants, oftentimes falling into rivers and dyeing them purple, and making them flow with sweet juice. In fact, it's believed that before Buddha meditated under the fig tree where he reached enlightenment, he first meditated under the Jambu tree. In Mesopotamian traditions, we find the Hulapu tree. In one version, the goddess Inanna, or Ishtar, found the Hulapu tree growing on the banks of the Euphrates River, and was so impressed by its magnificence and size, she transplanted it to her sacred garden in Uruk. There, the tree grew much larger, but over time it became infested by various creatures, a serpent at its base, a bird in its branches, and the demoness Lilith in its trunk. Inanna seeks the help of Gilgamesh, who comes to her aid and drives the creature away, allowing the tree to be used to craft sacred objects like her throne and bed. There's also a story in Javanese legend about the Upas tree, or tree of death. This was a giant tree said to grow in the tropical regions on a certain island. However, the trees were highly poisonous and would not only take out anyone who tried to collect its sap, but would also render the entire land they inhabit barren of all other species of plants. The Upas tree legend became very popular among early European explorers to the region. In Chinese mythology, we have the sacred Fusong tree, which was said to be a giant-sized tree that grew on the sacred island of the Eight Immortals, located somewhere to the east of China. This island was said to have huge mountains on it, with the golden temples of the immortals atop them. It's described as tall and radiant, with branches reaching to the heavens, and it's located where the sun rises, where man practices the original form of Taoism and has reached immortality and enlightenment. The Aztec have a similar sacred tree, the tree of the sun and moon, associated with their sun god and the sun's life-sustaining abilities. There isn't a whole lot of significance of this tree, but it is depicted in several Aztec codices with the branches that connect to the celestial realm above, highlighting its role as a mediator between two worlds. To the north in the Yosemite region, the Miwok tradition tells of the Wawana tree. In this tradition, they give us a specific tree, a giant sequoia no less, located in Yosemite National Park. To the natives, it was not just a giant tree, but a symbol of the enduring connection between the Miwok people and the natural world. And they cared for this tree and the surrounding forest with great reverence, as did many other cultures in the region with other trees. It gained fame in the late 19th century and early 20th century as a tourist attraction. It had a tunnel carved through it to allow people to drive through it, which was a common practice at the time to draw visitors to natural wonders. The tree was sometimes referred to as the Wawana Tree Tunnel. In Miwok tradition, all the giant sequoias, like the Wawana tree, were seen as sacred and embodying spiritual power. These trees were considered living ancestors, embodying the strength and resilience of the natural world. They played a role in Miwok ceremonies and stories, symbolizing the connection between the people and their environment. Sadly, the Wawana tree was damaged by a fire and fell in 1969, severing the ties between the spirit world and our world in the eyes of many natives. Further north in Inuit mythology, a creature known as Galskap, a giant figure, is said to have used a gigantic tree for a spear during his battles. While the stories of Galskap vary, some describe the tree he wielded as being of incredible size, stretching across entire landscapes and symbolizing his immense power. The tree Galskap used is described as being larger than most trees in the natural world. And then of course we have the many stories of the Tree of Life, some of which overlap with these trees mentioned. In the Greek myths, the Tree of Life is the golden apple tree located on the island of Hesperides, far beyond the known world, only accessible to gods and their descendants, guarded by Ladon, the terrible sea serpent. In the Bible, there's a similar story. The Garden of Eden has two trees that are not known to mankind currently, the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge. In the story, after Adam and Eve disobey God's command not to eat from the Tree of Knowledge, they are banished from the garden, leaving an angel guardian to keep man from entering, and to keep us from the Tree of Life. Similar to how Humbaba guards the cedar forest in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Chinese even say a sea monster guards the sacred island of the Fusong tree. Some have theorized that this sacred land at the end of the world was America. And the trees these stories were referring to were not only the redwoods and the sequoias, but also the giant cypress, giant oaks, giant chestnut, and elm that were growing here when Europeans arrived. Huge trees the size of which is unmatched by all but the last remaining redwoods, but they were ordered all to be removed despite ancient knowledge of these trees being extremely important to the health of the forest. Instead of sacred areas where gods inhabited and rare medicinal plants and mushrooms grew, they were seen as something to be conquered, much like Gilgamesh saw the Lebanon cedar forest. The giant trees are the ultimate expression of God's or the gods' power on earth, and became a major symbol of paganism and animism, because these trees were very much alive and fueled the forest, sending nutrients through the fungi, connecting to the plants around it, growing things like ayahuasca vine and magic mushrooms around it. It really seemed like these trees were inhabited by some kind of god or spirit. If anything in the environment was alive, other than animals and man, it was these giant trees. Living for thousands of years and contributing to the health of the entire forest around them. Rituals would be done at these sacred giant trees, and special care was taken of them before the Europeans arrived. Luckily, the last remnants of these still exist in California, but if you've never gotten to go over there and see them, I'd recommend adding it to your bucket list. Pictures do them no justice. The trees are as tall as skyscrapers and make you feel the power of God and nature. The fact that something can live so long and grow so big is incredible. Several redwood forests in California are also petrified in stone. So there's huge expanses of forest with giant ancient trees turned to stone. Pretty amazing to see in person. You feel like you're in some kind of fairy tale world. Now imagine much of the world is covered in those. That's what Earth was like thousands of years ago. At least the forested regions. It changes our whole perspective on forest-dwelling cultures, and could change the way many plants and mushrooms grew. Even the wood from these old-growth trees is much denser and stronger than normal wood. So maybe the destruction of these forests was only because of the expansion of our modern world. Or maybe someone had an agenda to sever our connection to these sacred spaces, and take away our access to the medicinal qualities these trees provide, in turn making us weaker and less spiritually adept. I wonder if the Buddha still would have reached enlightenment if he had not had the sacred fig tree or jambu tree to meditate under. Or if Odin would not have seen the secrets of death and the universe if he had not been able to hang himself from the giant Yggdrasil tree. Or if the Temple of Solomon would not have been worthy of housing the Ark of the Covenant without the special wood brought by the Phoenician ships from an unknown land called Ophir in the Bible. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about the ancient giant trees in the comments. Let me know if I missed anything people should know about them. Also, here's 2 more videos to check out. This one on the right here, I go more into detail on that story of Solomon and the sacred wood for the temple. And then this other one here is about the Chinese story of the Fusong tree. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.